So I will officially open this webinar. We have been still waiting for Carmen, who had to disappear, but I hope she will be reappearing soon and be with us. In the name of CercleS, I'm very glad to invite you to this fourth webinar about an again very interesting issue of our journal. The format of having some authors invited and being interviewed by guests and colleagues has proved to be an interesting format, and we are sure that this is also going to be the case tonight. So you have all seen the invitation, and I can just briefly share a look on the program with you. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Can you see? Yes, okay.
Yes.
Yes, so I hope Carmen will soon join, and I have seen that Gillian is here. Perhaps Gillian is also going to say a few words of entering. And then we have the pleasure to have two colleagues from the Greuter here who will also tell you something about important factors of our journal. And then we start a series of 4 interviews. We will start with an interview on digital storytelling as practice-based participatory pedagogy for English for specific purposes. It will be run by Mia Parnis, and she will be interviewing her colleague, also one colleague from Finland. Then we are going to have an interview on the topic, is individual competition in translators training compatible with collaborative learning? Well, this is surely interesting also in the context of today's discussion on AI. I'm looking forward to that too. We have learned that the interviewer cannot be here with us, but that instead of Ana Gonçalves, Maria Jose Perez is going to be interviewing. And then we will have Francesco Scretti being interviewed about using Google Docs for guided academic writing assessments. And last but not least, we are going to have a presentation by the author Henry Finch on the topic of dialogic co-creation in language teaching and learning. So you can see that we have quite a diverse sample of different interventions. And hopefully there will be time for some final discussion at the end of all the interviews. So let's see if Carmen has joined that in the meantime. I can't see her. So Gillian, would you like to say a few words in the name of the editors? Can you hear me, Gillian? I see her not. Oh, if not, so I will be handing over to Katarzyna Grzegorzek, who will say something about the journal within the Greuter's world, and will share some information about the impact factor, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, that's the plan. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Very well. So good afternoon and greetings, sunny greetings from cloudy Poznań. And rainy Poznań as well. As Sabina kindly mentioned, I would like to briefly introduce you into a new impact factor for the journal for language learning in higher education. As you may be already aware, this year Clarivate decided to introduce impact factor also for journals which were to June only in emerging sources citation index, which was for a while, for a few years, a kind of limbo. And now they decided to calculate impact factor for those journals. So since language learning in higher education was indexed and has been indexed in ESCI for a while, now it has its first impact factor, and it's 0.5. And now I have to leave you with this information because, as you also might know, impact factor is not something that we can look at without context. And for first year of having it, we actually don't have any context. What we can say for now is that 491 journals were having first impact factor this year, together with language learning and higher education. Now LLHE is in the category education and educational research, and I am working on actually adjusting this because we believe that we discussed this with Sabine and Carmen, and we believe that linguistics and language categories would be also very useful for the journal. So it might change for next year. And just as a brief information, if you don't know what impact factor is, it's a factor which we get by dividing number of citations that journal content has within a year, and that's the year of impact factor. It's always for a year before. It's calculated for the year before, and we divide this number of citations by the number of published articles. These are research articles or review articles which were published within last 2 years. And I'm sure that you know it, but just to emphasize it, it's now commonly used to evaluate a journal within a field. But as you also probably know, it's not the only metric we have, and for years it used to be more usable for hard science, for medicine, for biological science, and so on, not for humanities. But linguistics itself is kind of special category, as we know. So sometimes we can rely on impact factor also to see what's the actual value of the journal content. And as I said, now we have to wait for 5 years, 5 years impact factor, which will be given to us within 5 years. And the message for now is that if your institution requires from you to publish in a journal having impact factor, now you have it already, together with publishing in language learning in higher education. And if there will be more information I can share, I will definitely do it. And I will try to get the most updated one and provide Sabina and Carmen and Gillian with it. So yeah, that's all for now.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Kasia. So apart from having hopefully a big impact on our peer readers and colleagues, we are going to have also an impact factor, which makes us even more interesting and gives more value to our articles. Thank you very much, Kasia. So I see that Carmen, in the meantime, has managed to rejoin us, and I'm handing over to her in order so that she can say a few welcoming words to the colleagues, and then also start introducing the first interviewers and interviewees.
Thank you, Sabina. Sorry for the interruption, but there's been a total blackout here at the university because of a thunderstorm that we had, and this is why I was off of a few minutes. So university total blackout, and it's so nice. This is what I want to say, that it's not so nice to be back again talking about the CercleS journal. Actually, I'm very glad that Kasia Gregorek had the chance to take the floor and give you some information about the impact factor and other issues about the LLHE. We met almost a year ago. Actually, it was a little bit longer than a year ago. It was in December 2022, and now we're back again. And so you're all welcome. And again, it's nice to see the faces of the authors that Gillian and I read about, and then it's nice to see you in person. As in the other 3 webinars, we decided to focus on a specific issue, the 13.1 that was has been online since May 2023. However, it is also important to let all of you know that issue 13.2 has been released a week ago. So we invite you to actually visit the website and enjoy this new publication. As for 13.1, we selected 4 articles, and they are based on topics that inspired us for reflection. The first one in particular integrates the humanistic side of language learning and teaching, this time based on storytelling, integrated with the technological aspects that have become so common nowadays. This article also, and Mia will introduce the author in a few minutes, shows the functionality and also the integration of 2 different cultures, the Finnish one and the Portuguese one. The second article, while focusing on translators training, considers the dichotomy of individual competition and collaborative learning. We will connect with Portugal, and we will talk about it. The third one instead touches upon academic writing and strategies of assessment. This is an input, a precious input that comes from a Swiss university. And the final one features a presentation of dialogic co-creation realized with a special typology of learners, the academic personnel, academic staff. So we're sure that the 4 interviews will offer food for thoughts for everyone. Thank you to the interviewers and for the authors for accepting to be with us this afternoon. And then, I don't know, Jill, do you want to say something else about? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay, good. Hello, everybody, and it's nice to be back and seeing a lot of you all here today. Just 1 or 2 things I just wanted to focus on. First of all, I think it's safe to say that language learning in higher education is based both on research-based teaching and on teaching-based research, so 2 different perspectives. And these are 2 key concepts that I remember way back in 2010 with one of the first issues of language learning in higher education. And I think, indeed, this is what we are looking for in the papers that we would like to publish. These concepts must be very clearly outlined in the papers that you submit, so that we can send them out for review. This is also not forgetting the practical applicability of your research findings to language learning, as well as to teacher training. I think, again, it's important also to see the teacher as learning how to teach, which is also becoming a very popular topic, has become a very popular topic recently. Teachers need to know and learn how and what to teach, just as much as learners need guidance in their learning experiences, whatever they are. Just a quick word of thanks to all those who have submitted to their papers, and to all those who would like to submit in the future. Take time, do over what you prepare, as we take precious time in to take you through the various stages of the editorial process, which calls for professionalism on all sides to produce a solid piece of work. What else can I say at this point? I just hope language learning in higher education, as well as this seminar, is a source of inspiration for your future work that we hope to see very soon. Thank you. Now Carmen has disappeared again.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Gillian. I'm just taking over and handing over to our first interviewer, Mia, who is going to interview Tanya about her article on digital storytelling. So we're looking forward to your talk.
Thank you, Sabina, and thank you, Gillian. My name is Mia, for those of you who I haven't met. We haven't met yet, but tonight we meet. And good evening also to Tanya. And welcome to this webinar, all of you. I will start by introducing Tanya and her colleague. Tanya Vesalavarta is principal lecturer in marketing and communication at Haaga-Helia University of Applied Sciences in Helsinki, Finland, where she has been working for curriculum development, pedagogical development, and university industry relations for 20 years. Her teaching and research interests include education for sustainable development, international marketing, creative planning, digital storytelling, and autonomous learning. She has an academic background in comparative literature and English philology and professional background in marketing and corporate communications. And she currently works as a researcher and project manager for EU-funded projects at the Research Unit of Entrepreneurship and Business Development at Haaga-Helia. And her colleague, Margarida Morgado, who they have co-written this article together, is a coordinating professor of English Cultural Studies at Polytechnic Institute of Castelo Branco in Portugal, and has been teaching English for specific purposes for over 40 years. And she's a researcher in teaching English, intercultural education, and children's fiction. And she has background in English and German languages and literatures, and has worked in a faculty of education, training teachers, but also translators and secretaries. And she has been involved in funded European projects in these areas for over 30 years and has published in all these areas. She has extensive experience in collaborating with European projects and managing European funded projects. So Tanya, with your colleague, you have over 60 years of joint experience. It's very impressive. How did this collaboration between the universities start? Can you tell us something about that?
Sure, yeah. We met in the context of an EU project. And in those projects, you need to have this so-called geographical balance, meaning that you need partners from all corners of Europe. And that's why Finland and Portugal. We actually collaborated together or joined a EU Erasmus Plus project called Learn to Change Collaborative Digital Storytelling for Sustainable Change. And the aim of that project was to create digital storytelling pedagogies and materials for collaborating with university students, teachers, and industry partners to drive sustainable changes together. And when planning that project application, I was already working in another Erasmus Plus project, and my colleagues there suggested that I contact Margarida because of her interest in storytelling and literature. So we share a similar academic background, which I did, and Margarida was immediately interested, and we shared this 2-year project together. So that's the beginning of this.
That's the beginning. And I forgot to mention, you saw the title. You wrote together digital storytelling as practice-based participatory pedagogy for English for specific purposes. That was the title of the article. Can you tell us what common objectives you shared or share?
Yeah,
between
the
two?
objectives of the project, it was a so-called Corona call. So it was launched immediately after the emergency remote teaching period that we all went through. And the focus was on digital innovation. Because after the ERT, we all felt a bit tired. There was this phenomenon called Zoom fatigue, glassy eyes and fuzzy head, even more than usual. And we were looking for more varied and engaging ways to collaborate digitally. And that's why we applied for the project. And based on that shared experience of wanting to do something more participatory, more engaging with our students, we wanted to experiment with forms of digital storytelling to be able to engage more productively, in a sense, with students and stakeholders. So we wanted to co-create pedagogical solutions and digital storytelling processes and open educational materials to enrich university teaching and learning, I would say. And we also wanted to develop something that could be applied for multidisciplinary purposes. We had a multidisciplinary team with people representing languages and ESP, marketing, communications, tourism and hospitality, and ICT, for example. And we wanted to create a pedagogical model and educational materials that could be used to benefit all the individual disciplines, but also used for multidisciplinary purposes or to be applicable to any discipline, basically. Those were the large objectives we shared.
And what output did you achieve in the project?
Yeah, we had very concrete outputs, such as a digital storytelling pedagogy and process with 5 steps. We refer to these steps in the article. First of them is background research and audience insight, then moving on to concept design, then scripting and storyboarding. Only after that, digital production, and then publication and engagement. Students often want to go straight to digital production, but we need now we have tools to show them that, okay, we have these steps before the production phase. So that process model is one key output that we achieved. Because storytelling in general and digital storytelling are quite complex phenomena, and you can find plenty of sources and models and materials on the internet. And I think, and we thought that we need a roadmap for all that to be able to do this with our students and stakeholders more effectively, to manage the complexity. You can't control it, but you can try to manage it. So that's why the 5-step process. And then, of course, we created new educational content and practices for ESP, marketing, tourism, ICT. And between Margarita and myself, we actually developed a new outlook on how to combine teaching and create engaging content to develop students' competencies in both marketing and ESP. And that's what our article is also about, I think. And of course, last but not least, we ended up with this wonderful collection of digital stories created by our students. Videos, podcasts, blog articles, social media campaigns on different channels. And all those stories were aimed at promoting sustainable tourism and lifestyles. And we have, for example, stories of women entrepreneurs in Malaga. We have plenty of stories where students share their off the beaten track travel experiences from around Europe, for example. So it's a nice collection of digital stories.
where can we see these digital stories somewhere?
Yeah, we have the project website. Some
Okay.
sample stories, they're not all there, but some are there. You are welcome to visit the site.
And you mentioned stakeholders. Was it easy to find external stakeholders, or
Well, that depends. At CercleS, we've been working together with companies and other organizations for quite a while. Not quite the 20 years that I've been there, but say 15 years quite actively. So we have a large network of industry partners with whom to plan and implement projects like this. But I think one of the major successes of this collaboration project was that in all the other partner universities as well, teachers and students began to reach out to external stakeholders and industry partners. And I think it's a process as well. You start out with a smaller number of partners, and then you learn things when working with them, and then you can extend the network little by little. We produced some support materials for that as well as part of the project.
How would you describe the collaboration between the students and the stakeholders? Was there any challenges or?
Yeah, obviously project briefing is of key importance, and that has to be done together. So we need the industry stakeholders, teachers and students all involved in planning the project brief. What it is that we are aiming at here. Everybody knows their roles, everybody knows roughly the goal and the target. And when we are all on the same page, then after that, the collaboration and the steps that I mentioned can start. As far as how students felt about this, I think sustainability is something that really appeals to them. They want to do things that they feel is for sustainable development. And if there are industry partners who share that aim with them, I think the rest is history. Everybody is on board after that. So it's the topic of sustainability, of those real life sustainability challenges that we work with, that keeps the team together and motivates all stakeholders.
So what would you say the challenges were, or did you meet any, or? Yeah.
How much time do we have left? I have challenges. I would start with uncertainty tolerance with this pedagogical approach, because when engaging in creative work, storytelling, you by definition plan and create something that does not yet exist. And there's always some resistance by students towards what they do not know, or what they cannot fully control, or what they can't concretely envision at the outset. So dealing with that uncertainty is a challenge. But I think this digital storytelling framework, with its 5 steps and related educational resources, that helps us out here, because now we have plenty of support material for students and teachers as well to go through the complexities and the challenges that they encounter during their creative process. It doesn't take away the element of uncertainty. It's part and parcel of creative work, I think, but it is a tool to manage it. So that challenge is not overcome completely, but the materials we created help. Then differences between the level of students' linguistic competence. That was one of the challenges that came up, and we discussed a lot with Margarita as well. On the one hand, a creative project like ours and teamwork allows for flexible ways of participation and contribution for students, because even with weaker English skills, for example, you can still participate effectively and contribute if you have useful digital skills, for example, to offer. But especially with Margarita, whose students had to take a compulsory language test after the course, there was a need to apply specialized strategies to support those who were at risk of failing the test. But then again, because of this way of working that we applied, involves a lot of self-directed teamwork. It does give the teacher more time to deal with these special needs in the classroom. So there are pluses and there are minuses, but yes, those with weaker English skills did suffer a bit in terms of language learning with this approach. And then finally, teamwork. I think that's always a challenge here as well. As a teacher, what is needed is that you need to be sensitive to team dynamics and monitor and support students' teamwork appropriately. You need to inspire them when they feel hopeless, at a loss. You need to actively encourage them to reconsider and improve their ideas and concepts. They then tend to stick with their first ideas. They're very reluctant to do anything about them. So there, you need to be really active. And obviously, if they experience friction or conflicts, which they sometimes do, you have to be there to help them and help them negotiate and move forward. But then again, I think teamwork is always challenging. And if you learn something by making some mistakes here in an educational context, it's actually good for you because you prepare for life after graduation. And then you are not surprised when you encounter teamwork problems when at work. So learning from mistakes, it is at the core of this pedagogical approach, I think.
And that's one of the skills acquired during the course that's mentioned in your article, that the students work very much with shyness and tolerance and attitudes, and not only linguistic skills. Yeah,
they were writing learning journals throughout the digital storytelling process, and based on our analysis of those journals, they really do develop many skills and competencies that we also had as learning objectives when we decided to do this through digital storytelling. So this was one of the reasons we chose digital storytelling, was that we felt that we're able to develop these skills and competencies in students. Language competencies are one of the key skills and competencies there, but there are these other social competencies, interpersonal competencies.
So if somebody asks you why storytelling for English for specific purposes, what would your answer be?
Yeah, I'd say that it is based on the skills and competencies we wanted to develop. Well, some of them are there listed in the article. If I repeat them here now, systemic understanding of sustainability, I think is one of them. Then effective collaboration and teamwork, that we felt was important. Co-creation of digital content, obviously, using multimodal storytelling to crystallize and convey messages. That's important in today's digital environment. We felt exploring audience needs and reactions to the digital content to be created, experimenting with new digital tools students may be used to using the same tools that they like. We wanted to challenge them to widen their repertoire there. And then finally, just developing intercultural communicative competence, a global mindset, I'd say. So we felt that digital storytelling and collaborative digital storytelling across cultures would help us develop these competencies in students. And it turned out to be a fair assumption.
Very interesting. Do you give this, is this course offered every year, or was it just a project, or?
Yes, we all apply these materials now in our own teaching. At Haaga-Helia, we have an annual blended intensive program called CREA Spring School Inspirational Storytelling. And it has been, we've been running it since 2016, so it's not a new thing, but we always lacked this systematic approach and materials. And now we have this luxury of having it all there on the website. So yeah, that is going to take place in the spring term. It's in mid-May. And then Margarita is using the materials as part of her ESP classes in Industrial Branco. And all our other project partners have selected certain courses in their curriculum where they develop these materials we created further going forward.
So there's not a joint course, but the material is used in different courses at the university.
Yeah, and the blended intensive programs, those of course invite everybody in. So we use that spring school I mentioned as the development platform for the project. So all partners sent their students and teachers to Helsinki, and we also did a lot of work online and virtually. So hopefully all the project partners will be there again in May.
Oh, this is very, very interesting. Thank you, Tanya, for this discussion. Yeah. And I warmly recommend, if you haven't read the article, to read the article with all the details and more detailed conclusions. But it was really nice talking to you, Tanya. Thank you.
Likewise, thank you. Thank you for having me and for the invitation. It was a pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mia. Thank you, Margarita. I'm back again. We're still having electricity issues here on campus, but I'm back again. Thank you. Thanks a lot. And we're moving from Finland to Portugal. And I introduce Alexandra Albuquerque, and she's our author, and she will be interviewed by Maria Jose Pires. Ana Gonçalves unfortunately had some difficulties at the very last moment, and she cannot be with us today. Please, I give you the floor, Alexandra.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. Before Maria José starts introducing me, as we agreed, I would like to say that I'm one of the co-authors of the article. So me and my two colleagues from the Masters in Translation and Interpreting that today could not be here. So I'm representing them, and I hope I'll represent them well. So I hope it's a nice talk. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Well, I also want to thank you for welcoming me so on a last minute, let's say, situation. It was a very good surprise because I didn't know that much about translation, and now I'm looking forward to know more. So this is kind of a win-win situation because I'm learning a lot as well. So thank you also for welcoming me so warmly. Well, I'll introduce Alexandra, although I would like to know more about the other author, so feel free to fill in the gaps. And from what I have here, Alexandra Albuquerque, she has a PhD in linguistics terminology from one of the universities of Lisbon, University Nova. And her main research interests are specialized languages, terminology, business translation. localization and technical communication. She's a senior lecturer at the Polytechnic of Porto. It's called ISCAP, University of Porto, and she has strongly contributed to the internationalization process of this particular school since 2004. So we do have something in common as well. She has organized several international conferences and meetings, and she is also a reviewer in several scientific international journals, a member of the scientific board, and a post-graduation course on computer-assisted translation. This is also very curious. I would like to know more about that. She does work with this institution. It's called CEOPS. I believe it's
a research center.
Research center, yes. So it deals with inter and multidisciplinary research to help on the development and innovation and assist the community in the area of business services. So it's actually a big area. So, but Alexandra, would you like to also talk to us about the other author and how do you collaborate? Because we're talking about collaborative.
Yes, true. It's collaborative everywhere. Well, actually, the three of us are part of the coordination of the Masters in Translation and Interpreting. Sandra Ribeiro, she's the director or the main coordinator, and me and Laura Talon are co-directors of the Masters. So since we are doing this award every year in the framework of the Masters, and we were also organizing and hosting CercleS last year here in Porto, we decided to present this this article and to write this article speaking about our experience with this prize, this award. So both of the three of us are teachers in the Masters and directors of the Masters, basically that. Laura is from, she's an interpreter and also a translator, and she works with English and Spanish, and Sandra also works a lot with storytelling. So I was listening attentively to the former presenter because she's also very active with storytelling, but that's basically it.
Thank you so much. What really caught my attention when I read your article, it's this idea of collaborative learning and translation. It didn't really, from my perspective, that was already a challenge. So all these collaborative learning strategies and how they are implemented in the translation classroom that you have mentioned, and this is in line with the work of Tarek Shama on the role of competition and collaboration in language education. You said, and I'm quoting you because it's easier. It's you write, the three of you, you have this idea that the widespread use of collaborative learning in translator training has also led to a drastic reduction of individual activities in the classroom. I think we're all curious about this, and to a view of individual competition as a source of negative feelings among students. And I know we all worry about this. And you also mentioned who may focus on winning rather than learning, unquote. So I was wondering, how does this happen? How can students be prepared through these strategies you have designed for the job market? Specifically, since we usually see the translator, at least I did, profession as a solo activity. How does this work?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's really interesting. Naturally, during the Masters, during these 2 years, we have around 20 to 25 students every year. And we do our best to train them as translators, future professional translators. So they do have a portion of individual work, but it's mostly post-class. During the class, in order to make it more interactive, more interesting, and also more beneficial for all the participants, we promote many collaborative activities, meaning they do their work, they share their work, they compare their work, but there's normally not a goal of choosing the best work. It's okay, we compare, we discuss the best options and the best reasons for that, but we normally don't say, okay, student X has the best option and or has the best solution, in order to make it more equity, in order to make it a learning process. Individual work is of course important for a translator training, but in the classwork we do more a evaluation of the work that they normally do in their autonomous work time post class. This, of course, is centered in the student, so we don't want to make them feel uncomfortable because the colleague had a better option or a better solution, and we want them to learn with their mistakes, exactly like the former presenter was saying. It's always a very constructive and positive pedagogical approach. But this, of course, dilutes a bit the competition spirit, right? They are not competing in class. They are cooperating. They are learning from each other and with each other and with us as well. Rarely we give them, as teachers, we give them the solution as the sole solution possible for the problem, okay? So, of course, we adjust their options, we adjust their solutions, we make our best to make them understand why it's good or better or worse, but we don't tell them, now you have to do it this way. So we tend to accept whenever it's possible, of course, even if it's technical communication, all the options that are feasible and appropriate and suitable for the target text. So they do their work in class, of course, our purpose is for them to learn, but most of the times when they present the solutions or they present the tasks, they want to win a grade. The winning part was, okay, we want a grade. We are not very sure sometimes if they really are worried about learning. Some of them are. And it's good when they say, well, I would like to know more about my mistakes. I'd like you to explain me more why this is a mistake or why I wasn't that good in that part. But that doesn't happen that often and with all the students. So they're there, they do their job, they do their tasks, and they want to grade many times more than being worried about the process of learning. So both activities are, of course, practiced in class, individual and collaborative activities. But as I was saying before, in order to make the class a more interactive environment, we tend to promote more collaborative activities in class and individual in post-class. And then we do our monitoring individually with the students whenever they are willing to do that. The translation, as far as the last part of your question, the translation activity being a solo activity, I don't think it's true anymore. Yes, of course, they have to do their job alone or as much as possible alone. They have to, exactly as any of us has to do our own jobs. But it's more and more a community work or a community activity. We see more and more that translations are using social networks to cooperate, to keep track of each other's experiences, to do more training, to be aware of what's going on in the market, and also to share experiences and to share work when they have more extra work or less work, and to cooperate. So cooperation, I think nowadays, is a big part of a translator's work. If they want to be visible, if they want to be active in the market, naturally, when we come to translation as such, it's normally a work done with them and the tool that they are using. Yes, of course. But it's no longer the idea of a translator in their ivory tower doing their work away from the world and away from the social community. That was the purpose. Well, that was what we meant when we said that there was a reduction of individual activities in class, promoting or fostering more collaborative activities to make it, of course, more interesting, because we know how difficult it is and how challenging it is to keep a class interesting these days, right? With so many attractions they have apart from the class.
We do become performers, but all the time. But in practical terms, how can these collaborative learning moments be articulated with competition in the classroom? Because could they be mutually exclusive in the sense that they could exclude the other, like articulating for the competition and collaborative learning? I want to be the best, I want to win the competition, but I need to collaborate with you. So how does this work?
Well, in class, they are not mutually exclusive, of course. They can coexist in class. As I said, we do have some individual activities, but it's never to promote. It's rarely to promote a winner or to promote the best in class. And when we try to do that in class, most of the students don't like that. They don't like to compete. They don't like to because if they are not sure they're going to be the best, they don't like to tell the other student, well, or their mates, well, I think this is not very good. Even when we promote, for instance, a revision or reviewing work, we do that a lot. Some students translate and the others review. They normally have some difficulties in being a bit critical. They tend to be very sympathetic and nice to the colleagues. So their critical spirit needs to be fostered as well. And we try to do that, telling them that it's important to know how to criticize, how to receive criticism, and to understand that we are not the best in a certain situation and we need to improve, okay, with our mistakes. But that's not in class. That's not a very popular exercise, I may say. They don't like to be on stage and prove if they are the best or not. So that's why we promote this annual translation award. Of course, not all the students apply for the award from the masters, and we have students applying outside the masters. But we are tending to have more students every year. But again, they are afraid of this competition spirit. We expect them to understand that they are competing when they go to the market and when they are doing their internship. So this award is a way of making them less afraid of that, since it's still in a very safe environment. Okay, it's still in school, it's still not very, and they have a very good they can get a very nice award, so they already have a link to the market, and this is becoming more and more interesting for the students. But in class, if we try to promote a competition in class, we need to struggle a bit. They don't like to compete among each other in class. When they come to the prize, okay, they are not all coming, so there are different participants, but we understand that this is a very important skill nowadays in the market. The market is more and more competitive, so we need to increase these competition moments together with the collaborative. Sorry. And this is the way to do it, not the only way, of course, but this is a way to do it in a more or in a less class-oriented way, so to say.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious to ask you about what about the other ones, because if they develop those, what you mentioned 14 competences are activated in the course of these contests. So which accounts for 40% of the EMT competence framework. So what about the other students who do not participate in this context? Do you also train these competences in the classroom as well as the others?
Yes, of course, of course. They have several courses, and some of them are really translation oriented. So they need to do their work and they need to prove their skills in the language and culture competence, and also in the use of technologies and the use of and the analysis of text and all those competences. So we try to train as many competencies as possible during the training in the masters. When we calculated around 14 in one moment is just to make it clear that this one moment can aggregate a lot of competences that are normally being trained in a longer period of time and with more activities during the formal training in the masters. So this can be a way of them assessing themselves as well and applying the competencies that they already have acquired. If they didn't acquire the competencies before, they cannot do a good, cannot perform well in the prize. So of course we assume that we train them before, and this is something that they should try when they already are aware that they have the competencies to do it. But it can be very effective in the way that it aggregates a lot of competences in 2 hours, okay, with a lot of stress, with a lot of anxiety sometimes, but also with some output that is with an output or an impact that can be very positive for their future lives with the companies that support the prize, and this is something that we don't have in class. The only prize we give, which is not a prize, is the grade, but the grade is their work. So we're just assessing, we're not giving them a prize. So that's the only difference. But of course, the 2-year master course trains them in the competencies that we are expected to do according to the EMT competencies framework.
And to conclude, I'll go to your conclusion. Look for some words here that caught my attention. I think it's something that worries us. And in terms of the translators, we see machine translation systems, and you also mentioned that they can translate dramatically faster, those are your words, than any human translator at almost no cost. We know that. And translators need to be significantly better than machines at providing that adequate, fit for purpose source text to stay relevant in this labor market. So how can translators do this? How can they be better than machines? How can they beat the machines, if we're talking about beating the machines?
Well, that's also a $1 million question, but we really cannot compete with the machines in many ways, with the fastness, with the amount, the volume, with the scale. But we can train ourselves in our more human skills, so to say. Okay, the critical spirits, the sense of not a good sense, bom senso. Agora estou-me a esquecer da palavra em inglês.
The common sense.
Sorry? The common sense, thank you. And also the more creative skills that it's still hard for the computers to deal with, and for the machine translation to deal with. And this is, we translators now need to be more and more granular in our look at the text, in our analysis of the text, because the machines can really be very good, but sometimes, and many times, more and more, it's very difficult to detect the mistake because they are really good. So you need to be really trained on your critical analysis, in your detail-oriented skills, and of course the knowledge you have from the language and from the culture and from the domain, because only this way you can spot very, very dissimulated mistakes that sometimes can be very easily misseen if the translator is not more human than technical. So our technical skills are very important, but more and more we need to have a lot of knowledge of the subjects we translate. We need to be very critical. We need to know how to analyze and we need also to develop our creative skills. Among many other things, it's an ongoing process. I don't think there is a recipe that we can follow, but we really need to, and the good thing is we cannot beat them, so we need to join them the best way.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for the interesting questions.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Alexandra. And I want to invite all of you to read this the article that will give even more insights about this translation award. The article was co-written, co-authorship, Alexandra, with Laura Talloni and Sandra Ribeiro. Let me also remind you that at the end we have 15 minutes devoted to questions. So just in case you want to ask questions to the different authors, there will be time at the very end. And now we're moving from Portugal to Switzerland. So I'll give the floor to Francesco Screti and Annick Riven on academic writing.
Yes, thank you. And so it's my pleasure to have read more in details the article from Francesco Screti that I'm going to introduce briefly, and we will then discuss the different elements. So Francesco Screti currently works at the Language Center of University of Lausanne on the site of EPFL, which I found, well, personally interesting because 25 years ago I was there teaching, so it was nice to remember this period and this place. He's part of the working group on intercultural communication competence there, and he works also at the HEIG, Haute École d'Ingénierie et Gestion du Canton de Vaud, and also conducting a postdoctoral research at Fribourg Institute of Multilingualism. In his research profile, he reivindicates multi or transdisciplinary approach, which I quite enjoy as well as an approach, and that he also associates with being maybe undisciplinated. So maybe it's better if I leave the floor to him if he wants to focus on some more specific aspects of his curriculum before we start talking about the article.
Thank you very much, Annick, for this introduction. Thank you for letting me be here. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to showcase this research and to talk a little bit more about what was all this research project about. Well, no, I would say that you have been quite precise in introducing me, and I think probably the most important adjective was undisciplined. I find myself undisciplined. I find very difficult to stay in just one discipline, so I constantly cut across the different fields and disciplines. Sometimes at my expenses, some other times I learn many things, which I am happy to. Anyway, so this is about my indiscipline and my disciplinary background. I would say that we are done with that. So yeah, if you want to move on straight away. To the
article, which refers to Google Docs used for guided academic writing, as the title says, and on the students' side point of view. But I also found some other keywords that maybe I found I would like you to focus on when you have had that we are dealing with collaborative writing, and also dealing with students' anxiety, because we know that emotions are very important for language learning, and that the use of a new tool, which is not something so uncommon nowadays, but maybe you will also say more about the fact that it's a Google Doc. Maybe you can start describing the main elements of the learning environment, and also telling us why you have made this choice of the Google Docs and how it was received by the students and maybe also how the team of the teachers team made this choice. And well, tell us more about the background.
Yes, well, first of all, let me say that I am quite happy, because in the previous presentations and discussions about the previous papers, I was able to noting down some keywords which are still relevant also for my paper, like you mentioned too, right? Cooperating, co-constructing, dialogic, which is probably the keywords of the next presentation. Anxiety, someone has, it was probably Alexandra before who mentioned the anxiety of the students and way of coping with that and probably solving problem with the anxiety. But also, if I'm not mistaken, Tanya also had one of the objective of her project, of their project, was also to cooperate with students, right? So basically the idea at the basis of my project, the main goal, the ultimate goal was that to help students, right? Because let's be honest, we are teachers, we want to help students. We want to help students all the time, right? And the interesting thing was then, and you will see why this is so interesting, because in reality, my paper is the story of a fail, right? But we will see that later on. The idea was to help in students. I always wanted to see I wanted to look at myself as the good teachers, right? The good one, not the bad one, not the one that put harsh grades and so on, right? So I wanted to be this good guy who helps students, who supports students, who help them in literally writing their assessment. And I know I expose myself to criticism by doing this. Well, I knew teachers exposed themselves when they decided to adopt the Google Docs change in their curriculum, right? So basically, the decision was made by the teachers to to try to give it a shot and to see if it worked. After the data have been collected and analyzed, we can see that it worked in a certain sense, but it also raised some other questions which were not at all foreseen at the beginning of the introduction of this change. So this is what basically the paper is all about, right? To see what students actually perceived, what students thought about this change. And as has been said in the paper, well, the usage of Google Docs is by no means new. I mean, in 2019, it was still considered as innovative, right? Nowadays, it's probably not as innovative anymore. But what was interesting, the relative novelty of the paper was just to deal with the students' perception, what the students thought about this change introduced by the teachers. And yes, well, probably something more needs to be said about the learning environment, how it works. Other points, other commonalities with the people that preceded me today, because that was basically the learning environment was a hospitality school, a vocational school, so not an academic institution, 100%. The course was academic writing, so that was the big difficulty of this course, that dealt with academic issues within a school which was not really meant to be academic, was not really meant to train students in academic field, right? It was rather a school, well, vocational school, or at least half vocational school. So this was the most important thing, I would say, that made that course particularly difficult for the students, right? Another major difficulties that the student faced when confronted with this subject matter was the English, well, the academic English, right? Many of the students, this school is an international school, so many students coming from at least 100 different nationalities. Very heterogeneous classes, heterogeneous in terms of course, of level of proficiency in English, heterogeneous classes in terms of students' background, students' previous training, students' shared knowledge. And so these basically were the major challenges, right? That this course, that the teachers teaching this course were facing. And of course, using the Google Docs was supposed to be one way to help the students to guide the students in writing the final assessment, which is literature review. It was a literature review, right? So 3 to 5 sources. Well, at the beginning it was 5, then it was changed to 3. But anyway,
yeah, maybe we can focus now more on the use of the Google Doc itself, because I was when I read. I will quote the sentence where you say that you didn't want it to be just a case of sugaring the pill, and you didn't want a simple strategy to soften criticism or to balance criticism with praise, but instead you saw the comments that can be provided by the Google Docs as a way to reward students for their work and draw attention to points that needed improvement with as clear as possible indications. So maybe you could tell us more about how it worked, because what is interesting in the Google Docs is that the teachers could make comments, but the students could react to these comments.
Exactly.
And this is how the dialogue is starting. So maybe you could tell us more about how the students proceeded, how did they react to the comments? Did they use the Google Doc function to do so? If you can give us more information about that.
Yes, that was exactly the point. The point was to basically put in place some tool that allowed teachers and students to work together and hence to talk together, right? So that was the idea of having some dialogue with the students. Unfortunately, as far as I can say, many students did not took the full advantage of the technical features of the Google Docs, right? So many students did not use it as it was meant to be. So for asking questions, for example, for replying. Some students did it. Some students replied the comments with questions, or for example, questioning or asking for clarifications about the teacher's comments. But it's also true that given the structure of the course worked with in-class sessions where students could actually ask the teachers face-to-face some feedback on their own papers, so on their ongoing work, or they could raise general questions that could be answered in the plenum, so in front of everyone, so that everyone could receive the answer for their issues. So this was one point. Another point is that students, well, of course, could have done more with given the affordances, the technical affordances of the Google Docs, but they, in a certain sense, they underused it. At least that was the impression that the teachers had at the end of the course, that the students underused it, right? And what emerged are other major problems that we will see later on. So in a certain sense, the Google Docs went underused, right? Underexploited. It was underexploited. Anyway, well, the teachers used the Google Docs to make comments, so that's why it was not used simply to sugar in the pill. It was just used. It was rather used to provide the feedback, a detailed, a personalized feedback, a timely feedback, and also a feed forward. So it was used to tell the student what they had to do next, which is something students appreciate a lot, because it basically prevents them from going off track, right? Which is something that many students actually mentioned in their comments. They appreciated this opportunity to always be put on the right track by the teacher, right? By the teacher overlooking, by the teacher, in a certain sense, watching their work.
Okay, and if we move now to the, well, you had 4 research questions, which were: how do you feel about using the Google Docs to write a literature review? What are the advantages, disadvantages? How do you feel about having the teacher guiding you? Do you think the procedure will help you, etc.? So maybe you can, well, you have already started to give some hints about their impression, but I was stricken by the fact that they said that it was like being watched by Big Brother, which I found really striking, because I mean, having some feedback from their teachers is something they are normally used to. And in this environment, they had the opportunity to answer to their teachers through the use of the comments. So I was wondering, well, you gave some hints in the discussion. Why did this happen? Why maybe the dialogue didn't work as well as originally planned? Was it because of this Big Brother feeling, or because they, as you said, they underused it? But why then did they underuse the affordances?
Well, I think that, well, let's start from the beginning of your question. The beginning is, how did they feel about the Google Docs? So the answers provided from the students, just to give you an idea, there were 220 students, 110, which is basically 50% of the population, responded the questionnaire, so they responded the survey, and out of those 110, basically the overwhelming majority was happy with the introduction of the Google Docs. So when maybe 80 or 85% of the students were happy. But the point is, and we as teachers, we know that what interests us is not the majority, right? What interests us as a teacher and also as a researchers is always the cracks in the picture, right? So basically, what emerged was a certain discomfort. Students mentioned a certain discomfort, a certain unease for being watched. This is terribly important because it shows an enormous divergence between what the teachers thought at the beginning was the goal of the Google Docs and what instead some of the students, okay, a minority, but some of the students still raised these questions. So one of the main questions was basically students reclaimed the right to procrastinate. Whereas by being watched by students, by being watched by the teachers, well, of course, they could not, I mean, they could not procrastinate. They were forced, in a certain sense, to work regularly on a weekly basis because they were told that the teacher were going to open their Google Docs on a weekly basis. On another other type of comments were about the freedom. Students felt limited in their freedom of, I don't know, probably drafting, redrafting, and so on. So from a certain point of view, I can understand the anxiety of being constantly watched, constantly, of knowing that there is an editor like the teachers watching the product. But teachers were absolutely clear with students that that was not the goal. The goal was, well, from a certain point of view, to force them to work on a regular basis, so basically on a weekly basis on the production of the completion of the literature review. And from another the other goal of the teachers was to help them, to support them, to engage with them in this conversation. But unfortunately, that wasn't what the students, or at least that wasn't what all of the students realized. There were still some pockets of resistance, right? Some criticism from the students, who felt watched, which was absolutely not at all the original goal of the teachers.
As we need to conclude, I suppose I would raise a final question, which is not part of your article, but time is changing, and we all think about IA. Do you think that, well, what could be changed? What other tools could we use? And we have now knowledge of some projects where, for example, the students would have their text corrected by artificial intelligence, and they need to compare and discuss the differences between the text, for example, and their own text, and then reformulate. Do you think this could be there could be a dialogue of that kind? Would it be even worse for anxiety? Well, it's just an opening. You can answer what I mean.
I don't know, Annick, if it is going to be worse for students. for sure is going to be better for teachers, because the adoption of that Google Docs meant a huge, a tremendous, a gigantic amount of work for the teachers. Even though they just dedicated 5 to 10 minutes per paper, well, you do the math. There were 200 papers, 220 papers, split into 5 classes. So it was many classes per teacher, many students per teacher. So it was a huge amount of work. If the artificial intelligence had existed at that point, at that moment, probably it would have been great to use it to make the comments so that the teachers would have worked less. And of course, that would have probably displaced, would have moved one part of the burden from the teacher's shoulders to the students' shoulders, right? And would have been a more reflective work that the students would have been asked to perform. Okay, sorry for this provocative answer, but of course that gave me the opportunity to talk about how huge was the amount of work required to teachers who wanted to work with these Google Docs. As per your question, I would say, as far as I know and as far as I'm concerned, that will probably be great for the students to reflect on a correction made by an artificial intelligence. If I am not mistaken, there was in the webinar Sara Cotelli, who is quite an expert on artificial intelligence and automatic translation, but she's probably left. Oh, that's a pity, because that would have been nice to ask her the question, but she's not there anymore, unfortunately, or at least I cannot see her anymore. But
anyway, it's a huge question.
I think so. Yes,
at least,
it is.
Because we are all split, I suppose, between the I don't know, at least in my context of trying to make the students avoid using it or making the most of it, because we know they will be using it. So, well,
Yes.
but that will remain a question for today. Thank you. And well, I invite you to read this article, which is enlightening for the questions of dialogic relationship between teachers and students. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to you, Annick and Francesco. Yes, indeed, Sara Cotelli left, but if I can mention, there is another friend, Cesare Zanca. He's been researching a lot on artificial intelligence. So just in case, you can get in touch with him later on, or Cesare can ask a question later on. Thank you for letting us know more about the use, or as you said, the underuse of Google Docs. And Annick, I was also happy to hear that with this interview, you found yourself back into a familiar university place. I mean, the matching was done just by chance.
Yeah, but it was
really
nice.
happy to hear that. Okay. And now we're moving to the final article. Actually, at the very beginning, when we introduced the authors, said that the final one is not an interview, but it features a presentation of a dialogic co-creation of activities, of materials, realized with, and I'm sure that many of us are interested in that, with a very special typology of learners, academic professors. So I'm giving the floor to Henry Finch, and we're moving this time from Switzerland to Germany. Henry, floor to you.
Can everyone hear me? Excellent.
Yes.
Well, I see a bunch of nodding heads. Thank you, Carmen and Jill, for organizing. It's nice to see your faces after so much correspondence. Sabina, nice to see you again. I think that I remember your presentation on, I think, organizational restructuring from Porto very well. Alexandra, it's nice to see you again. Thank you again for moderating the talk on this presentation a year ago. A lot has changed. My perspective on this, I will refer briefly to a comment from a reviewer of this article that said toward the conclusion, nothing groundbreaking here. So a disclaimer for the group, no big claims. I will accept that I am very likely the greenest language teacher in this group. I've been teaching foreign language for 3 years. Prior to that, for 10 years, I was teaching creative writing and music to children ages 3 to adults age 80. I hold a Master of Fine Arts in Poetry from the University of Iowa Writers Workshop in the United States. As part of my work for TU Darmstadt, I teach English for civil engineers, STEM English, to undergraduates as a sort of bridge program to a 50-50 English-German master's. And then the other 50% of my work, which is the topic of my paper, is a sort of one-to-one tutoring, advising, coaching. There's a lot of language politic in what I call this as to how I am perceived. So the official name of this offering is English Language Consultation Services. Sounds safe, sounds approachable. Doesn't necessarily make me a teacher. Doesn't imply that there's a top-down hierarchy, which I'm certainly interested in disrupting and taking advantage of. The basis of this sort of a set of groundwork that I'm certainly everyone is familiar with. There's a lot of tipping of the hat to the negotiated syllabus, needs analysis from Hutchinson and Waters. Certainly a lot of influence from Little and Downs' work in learner autonomy and the creating or modeling of the desired learning environment and learning behavior of my students. Froman's work in Lautensdenken and Thinking Out Loud, and Mota's recent work in Exploratory Talk are all a sort of big stew with a big heavy dose of Bakhtin and the importance of recognizing that these utterances don't exist in a vacuum, that the external needs to become internal, the internal needs to become external. So I'm very curious and excited about how to do that. Let's return to a moment to me acknowledging that I'm the greenest person in this group. I was very likely the greenest language teacher at the university here when I started. And I had very little idea of what to do when my supervisor proposed this offering to me. It began with a professor in civil engineering, a program director as well for a master's program, who wanted to improve his English, generally speaking, for lecturing, for working with students. And to prepare for our discussions, I researched infrastructure planning. I just researched his courses, read one of his publications, and came to him in the first lesson and said, could you explain land use redevelopment for me, please? Just as an outsider. And so suddenly there's a need for the learner to make that bridge, to build that bridge. So it's under the guise of just a talk. But importantly, what it does for the learners, it lowers this inhibition threshold, but it also lowers the learning threshold. I think that certainly with interdisciplinary work, there's the perception between disciplines that the threshold is very high, when in fact the threshold is very low. Ying Imbert, I believe, makes the claim that all a person needs, all a learner of a language needs, is the curiosity to just imagine what a discipline is like, what a concept is like, and then to approach it with a question to either have that confirmed or denied by the second party. I am that party. I am the person who goes in with my ignorance and says, I'm the outsider. I've read a little bit about this. Let's have a discussion. So then I make notes of language errors. I make notes of how the discussion develops. And then those developments are used to iterate the content for the subsequent sessions over the course of a semester. So I've worked with engineering professors, worked with administrative staff in our Center for Educational Development and Technology, who wanted to translate presentations for mental health and wellness from German into English. And so I researched wellness and mental health and came to them with questions to help them familiarize themselves with target vocabulary, for example, and to expand and exercise and hopefully strengthen that, I believe in Tanya's presentation, you were referring to it, this uncertainty tolerance, but also error tolerance, this fear of losing face. Thirdly, I think when this began, I was working with a member of the executive board at the university to develop keynote speeches on science communication. A similar sort of approach here where I was researching, I think I was reading articles on narrative and storytelling, and we were just having a discussion. And these discussions slowly turned into a sort of skeleton of a keynote that turned into this person's first keynote speech in English. So they're small chats that hopefully lower the learner's inhibitions to empower them to create their own learning content that, at least after a year of researching on this, that it's leaning more toward, it's becoming more a constructionist approach instead of a constructivist approach. So instead of just focusing on the learner creating the content and saying, well, aren't I a good teacher? With a constructionist approach, this like felicitous impact that the students have by not only creating something, but they're creating something that is shareable. So we're sharing the content with each other. So something that is external becomes internalized, and that's externalized. So outside of this Einzelunterricht, this one-to-one tutoring, I'm now working to move this sort of method of teaching into my larger classes. That was my lightning overview of this this method and this project that's the beginning of my doctoral dissertation now. So things are picking up. Alexandra, I see just your expression, and you have the same sort of expression from the first time I gave this, which was, oh my God.
Not at all. No. I found it very interesting for the first time, and I'm finding it interesting the second time. Come on.
No, I don't mean to be self-deprecating, but there are a lot of connections that I'm making. So I feel like I should apologize for being a bit frenetic in my presentation of this research and practice.
No, thank you. I'm just thinking of the things you said, and some things you said, which are really interesting. Thank you.
So as I am sort of moderating my own talk, and since the topic is dialogue, my microphone is on and everyone else's is off, which seems a little unfair.
Henry, thank you. Actually, we could start since we're talking about this dialogic dimension. I invite anybody to ask questions to you about what you about your article, about what you said, and this short but very clear and intense presentation, because you're actually giving the impression that you truly believe in this this experience, and you enjoyed the experience that you had with the professors, and especially the engineering professor to whom you devote one full section in the article. Any questions for Henry? We will start with Henry, and then obviously we will give you time to ask questions to the other authors as well.
So Henry, if I may start. So it's like a mutual process of learning, yes? So you have become more, you have become more of an expert, or not an expert yet, but more familiar with civic engineering. And hopefully the professor has become more of an expert in giving a keynote in English. From a teacher's perspective, it's still interesting to what degree you feel, or you have some evidence about, on the level of linguistic acquisition, not on the level of competence building, yes, competence building in the sense of having confidence building, sorry, but on the level of linguistic acquisition and performance. To what degree do you think that this approach, the format you chose, was really helpful, and was perhaps more helpful than another like one more classical teaching lesson?
To that, I would say that the two are mutually beneficial. That of course, there's a goal of developing these competences of tolerance, but there's also some scaffolding involved in, let's say, overgeneralization or the use of technical vocabulary. I'm monitoring for errors the same way I would in my larger classes. So the short answer is yes, that I'm looking at the competencies of the students, the intercultural competencies, this lack of fear, perhaps, to take the hat off for a moment, and then to put the hat back on again. Of course, at the core of this is language acquisition. But the acquisition of vocabulary is not independent of intercultural competency, or ought not to be, perhaps.
Thank you. We could go on with this conversation, but I'm sure there are other questions to Henry or to other colleagues. So yeah, the floor is to all of you.
Henry, thank you very much for your presentation. I was just wondering, since you mentioned a keyword which is quite important for me, which is power and power balance, I would like you just to I don't know, to just talk a little bit more about that. Explain a little bit more what you meant by that, and how did you cope with this with your effort to balancing the imbalance. So
sure.
If you can.
Happily. The group might agree that there is a power dynamic implied, a hierarchy between a teacher and a learner. And no doubt in a one-to-one setting, those perceptions are amplified. And so with this sort of approach, method, however we want to call it, the learner is maintaining their role as content expert. And because I bring my naivete and curiosity of the content to the foreground, this, from my perception, disrupts that perception. And so it's then perceived as just a chat. If that answers your question, Francesca.
Because what I found absolutely interesting in your case is that since you're not teaching normal students, normal pupils, you're already teaching recipients who already has some kind of a how can I say, legitimized expertise, right? So it's a subject who is already legitimized, whereas let's say plain students from higher education, undergraduate students and so on, they always feel, or at least in a certain sense, in that case, I would see more clearly the imbalance you're mentioning, right? But in the case you're telling us of a teacher who is already a teacher, who's already has a PhD, who's already a specialist in engineering and so on. So this matter of the balance and of the powers, on the power becomes way more complex than in a normal teacher-student situations, right?
But putting this naivete forward, and I think this, what I should stress is the sort of footwork that I'm doing of going into the content, going into the specialty of the learner and bringing content-related questions to the discussion sort of hijacks this a bit. And I would never say that I'm tricking my students, period. It can certainly be perceived as such that I'm tricking them into having a discussion and maintaining their position as they get to explain something to me. And they'll use their English as far as it will take them. And then when they reach a point where they can't build a bridge anymore, then we bring in thinking out loud. Then we bring in exploratory talk. So it's really sort of hotwiring, hijacking their expertise and driving it as far as it will go. And then making note of all the little errors along the way, and then using that to build the next lesson.
Thank you, Francesco. Thank you, Henry. Actually, if we continue on this path, there will be so many other issues, because as I said at the beginning, teaching, and as Francesco said, teaching learners who are already experts in another discipline, but they are professors already, they teach already. So it is a great challenge. It is a great challenge, and I think that we could spend a long time talking about it, but we're moving towards the final part of the webinar. So time is open also for questions to the other author. So please feel free to ask questions to Henry again if you still want to, but also to Alexandra, Tanya, and Francesco.
Tanya, may I ask you a question? Alexandra, sorry. No, it was Tanya. There, I made it up for Tanya. I have notes for everyone. Sorry.
Tanya.
Concerning the perception of narrative. So if your group is multidisciplinary, they're collaborating with each other,
yes,
and also with industry partners. I think of how the expectation to be dynamic, to be changing, and to incorporate science communication into all of these different fields. How, in your experience, does the perception of narrative sort of impact how the learners are working with each other? Do you notice that a particular group views narrative as serving a different function as another group?
Yes, certainly. I usually work with young day students. We also have adult students, evening students, and those two, in terms of digital storytelling, are two different groups entirely. But with you working with the young students in their 20s, yeah, they definitely have diverse perceptions of what they think narrative is, what makes up a good story, what a story is. Some right from the start feel that, okay, this old conception of narrative and how a story should be formed and designed is something that is not for them. We don't do this anymore. This is not our conception. We are used to social media, TikTok, sort of fast changing episodic narratives. And then there are others who are really into the more traditional conception of stories and narrative representation and structures. So it varies a lot. And we always say, fine, it is your interpretation of a story, but still, there are certain things they need to take into account, like the audience. Who is this for? What do they want? What are their needs and channels they prefer, etc., etc. So it is the audience that needs to be the key or at the core of their planning process. But yeah, definitely, I think that's one of the benefits of the approach, to hear and see what different teams conceive as narrative and story. Is that what you meant at all?
Yes, that's what I meant. And a follow-up question would be, among these different stakeholders, if you will, how was there a difference, an observable difference? Is there an observable difference for you among these disciplines as to how important narrative is in their respective fields?
I haven't observed that, to be honest. I think they in my classes, in that blended intensive program, for example, that I'm running annually, students always work in multidisciplinary, multicultural teams, and they bring in their views, obviously, when they start co-creating and when they proceed in the digital storytelling process. But I haven't noticed differences between disciplines in that sense, but the characters representing different disciplines are different. Like I mentioned, some students always want to go straight to digital production. They're not that interested in research and concept planning and scripting. Usually ICT students, they are right there. Step 4, digital production. When do we start? Marketing students as well, quite impatient, although they do know you need to do your research and you need to proceed according to a certain process, step by step. So yeah, in terms of impatience, there are differences, but as multidisciplinary teams, they work as teams, and I think the disciplinary differences kind of disappear, and they find strengths and ways to collaborate and sort of compensate for each other's gaps and weaknesses.
Since we have Tanya here, I was wondering if
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, Henry.
Can I
Mia, please?
Yes, to Tanya, I was wondering if I borrow one of the concepts in the other discussions, the idea of assessment. Since you have you had many groups, you were many teachers in the courses, you had many elements, you had traditional tasks, you had learning journals, you had visual, digital tools. how did you grade, or how was the assessment done?
Yeah, good question. We talked about this a lot during the project and ended up setting up a task force focused on assessment. And that wonderful task force came up with this rubric for assessment. Obviously, the digital storytelling challenges and then the projects and the courses and the educational contexts, they were all different. And in the end, the assessment of your digital storytelling project had to be carried out within the framework of your educational context. It was integrated with your course, and obviously the course objectives determine in the end how you assess. But we did produce a rubric for assessing digital storytelling process and digital storytelling product. And the way we approached assessment here on a general level was we had 4 transversal skills or themes running through both process and product. Creativity, obviously, was one of those themes, then reflective learning, collaboration, and then adaptability, openness to change during the creative process. And then we created qualitative assessment criteria for all these transversal skills for both process and product. And based on that rubric, we hope teachers and students as well can plan and evaluate and give feedback on their process and product. I haven't heard any problems with using that rubric. I've been using it for a while, and it can be, of course, tailored to different contexts if need be. But that was our solution. As for learning journals, those we did not use for grading, because we wanted students to be honest and reflect on problems and mistakes as well. So we repeatedly told them that you can be totally open and honest. We won't, it won't affect your grade. It was difficult to make them believe that, by the way. so we think it was important to stress that. Although we did say that obviously, in terms of final evaluation, anything they can give us in their learning journals gives us extra information and makes it easier for us to evaluate things, teamwork, collaboration, for example, that we're not there to observe all the time. But still, we really, really wanted them to be honest and not right for us, but right for themselves, rather.
And the teacher did the grading, not the external stakeholder, for instance?
The stakeholders were involved in final evaluation. It was co-evaluation, all parties there, self-assessment, peer assessment, feedback discussions, a jury at the end consisting of teachers and industry partners. And yes, it was all there. They did get a lot of feedback, which is really important in projects like that, so that they get a feeling that their efforts are appreciated and that they get continuous feedback, not just at the end, but throughout the process.
Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, Mia. Maybe we have time for one more questions. Then I would like to give the floor back to Sabina for a final wrap up. In the meantime, we're receiving messages. Teresa Ting is saying, excellent webinar, very informative, many thanks. And Joaquin Guerra, thank you for this interesting sharing. Then he had to run back to his class. One more question, and then our goodbye.
I have a question for Alexandra.
Okay, please.
Alexandra, your paper and your talk brings to mind literary translation, which is out of the scope from what I gather of this frame, but it nonetheless brings to mind the idea of fidelity in translation, and in language teaching, the idea of mitigation. So with that in mind, how competitive are students in regards to their exercising of uncertainty tolerance? And perhaps how do you work with students to develop or practice this uncertainty tolerance?
Can you, this what? Sorry, I couldn't hear well.
Uncertainty tolerance, just
okay.
not knowing.
Yes, okay. Well, we don't deal with literary translation, we deal with technical translation, but we do have some exercises and activities on transcreation, which has a lot of creativity involved. And concerning the uncertainty that they experience and uncertainty of knowing the right translation or the right word, let's put it like that. We try to give them tools and strategies for them to be sure about their positions and about their options. Mainly when there is not only one solution, especially with more creative tasks, but not only. The only thing the strategy we use more to give them assurance that they can go on with their work is that before they propose a solution, they need to do their research, they need to know, they need to be sure of what they're proposing, and they need to justify their option. It can be different from the others, but they need to be sure that it's not only because it was in the internet or because it was in this or that that source. They need to be sure how to argue and how to justify the options they go for. That's the training we try to do as much as possible. Not so we don't struggle for the only one solution, but for the right one according to the good research, the good knowledge, and the suitability of the option they chose. Always grounded on good arguments and good reasons. I don't know if it's answered to your question.
It certainly does. This notion of accountability, I think, does a lot to promote like metalinguistic skills among learners.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Alexandra. Thank you, Henry. And once again, it was so nice to be all together again today. But very nice to get to know you, the four authors. And don't forget that you can visit the De Gruyter website if you want to continue reading all the other interesting articles that we have selected. Gillian and I, and that you can find on number 13.1, but also number 13.2. And don't forget that next year, presumably in 6 months' time, we will organize another webinar around 13.2. I noticed that there are some authors who had their articles just published on this issue, so maybe it may be you next time, so get ready just in case. Sabina, I give the floor to you for the final wrap up.
So thank you, Carmen. And before wrapping up and sharing my personal conclusions, I would like to thank also you, Carmen and Gillian, for the tremendous work you have been doing for having this journal coming true live. We, within the executive committee of CercleS, we've got, yes, quite an impression, and it's only probably a partial evidence we can really perceive of the work you do. So thanks a lot. And also thank you for preparing this webinar and choosing articles and inviting authors. Of course, I also want to thank all the authors and all the interviewers. I found it very interesting, and I got a lot of new insights. And if I have the role now to wrap up this webinar on a very personal level, I was once again struck to what degree the human factor, the rapport, the peer learning and fostering of learning have shown very important for also effective language learning. So what is often seen and still discussed by some teachers as being something which can not be combined. No, it's the other way around. And you have made us, you shared and gave us an insight into how you approach this. I'm talking now about the authors. And so that's why I was also impressed by all the authors' commitment and will to foster their students' language competence, but also their students believe in themselves, in their assertiveness. And I think that this human factor and this human interaction will be one of our biggest challenges, or has become one of our biggest challenges, because we have to compete with AI instructors and tutors who are also not only very performant in translation, but they also perform it in many other ways. And we will have to think twice to what degree, in a very open discourse, to what degree our own contribution as human teachers, tutors, facilitators makes a difference. And I hope that we will also have in the future more evidence about it, more experience we can share, also within that community of CercleS. And I'm looking forward to further discussions on that topic. So for the moment, I'm wishing you a very pleasant evening. And thanks again to all of you, editors, interviewers, authors, and all colleagues attending this webinar. Goodbye, and looking forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.